In 1980, one film shocked audiences and became a notorious entry in the slasher genre. A horror film that brought terror to the streets of New York City and left an unsettling mark on horror cinema. Today, we're diving into the grim-covered nightmare,
Maniac.
Maniac is the love child of actor Joe Spinell and director William Lustig, who wanted to make a gritty and realistic horror movie. They were able to scrape together $48,000. $6,000 of that was from Joe's role in the recently finished William Friedkin movie Cruising, where he starred opposite Al Pacino. $12,000 came from producer Andrew W. Ferroni, and the remaining $30,000 came from director Lustig. As the movie was being made, the money grew to $135,000 as the trio placed it in a stock market account. During production, the budget grew to over $320,000, thanks to British producer Judd Hamilton, who only had one condition: his then wife, Caroline Munro, would be cast as the heroine. The movie follows Frank Zito, an Italian-American serial killer whose crimes are a result of his traumatic past. Once he has killed his victims, he scalps them, takes their clothes and belongings, and places them on mannequins in his apartment. Throughout the movie, Frank's mental state gets worse, and the killings don't stop. He meets a photographer, played by Caroline Munro, who Frank starts to fall in love with. He tries to have a normal life, but once he sees her holding the hand and giving a friendly kiss to a female friend of his at a photography studio, Frank gets filled with rage, and we know where this will lead to. This woman is Rita. Frank steals her necklace from the studio and plans to give it back to her just before he kills her. He visits her and hands the necklace over, then leaves. But we know he hasn't left. He hides in the apartment and grabs Rita after she comes out of the bathroom. After he ties her to her bed, he starts shouting at her and addressing her as Mother. Frank's mental state has gotten worse. Towards the end of the movie, Frank hallucinates that his dead, decomposing mother is attacking him from the grave. He runs back to his apartment, where the many mannequins have come alive. They all attack him, and they kill him. The movie ends with the police breaking into his apartment and seeing that Frank had killed himself. As the officers leave, Frank's eyes burst open. Even though the movie is classed as a slasher, the movie works more better as a psychological horror. Frank is dealing with a lifetime of trauma caused by his own mother, who would do humiliating and damaging things to him as a child. As he grew up, these only became worse. Seeing how Frank deals with his fractured psyche by killing others and thinking that they are his mother just shows how much hatred he has for her. Also, New York City at that time, it wasn't the hustling and tourist-attracting city that it's known for today. Back then, New York City was a place people didn't want to go to. It made people scared to go out at night, and this is the way it's portrayed in Maniac, as a cold and depressing place to be, which only amplifies the horror. When Maniac was released in 1980, the gruesome effects on display were created by special effects legend Tom Savini. Just before filming began, Spinell and Lustig asked Savini if he would be interested in making Maniac, as they saw how brilliant his work was on Dawn of the Dead and they wanted the same type of realism. Savini was getting scripts sent to him by nearly every director who was trying to bring a horror movie to the screen. As he read through them, he didn't want to just do a splatter movie for the sake of it. Meeting with Spinell and Lustig, Savini saw that there was more than just gore to the film. He saw Frank Zito as a person who you would walk past on the street and not know that he is a sadistic serial killer. The script never had the outlandish kills that we see in the movie. These all came about when the three of them, Ludwig, Savini, and Spinell, just sat down and thought of ways how to up the intensity and the dread of the film with gore, and this was also instrumental in depicting Frank's disturbed nature. They succeeded. When Maniac was released in 1980, the gore effects were mainstream news. But not in a good way. There is one kill in the movie that stands out amongst the many brilliant effects it has, and that is the exploding head scene of Disco Boy. Tom Savini plays the part of Disco Boy, who is getting down and dirty with a girl in the back of his car, when Frank Zito watches. The girl spots him and quickly changes her mind and wants to go home. Jumping back into the front seat, they start the car, only for Frank to be standing in front of them, shotgun in hand. Then, in a slew of fantastic slow-motion shots, he jumps onto the hood of the car, aims the shotgun, and Disco Boy's head explodes like a pumpkin being dropped from a rooftop. The gore effect is phenomenal. The fake head was filled with fake blood and leftover food, which consisted of shrimp dip, cabbage, and apple cores. When filming the shot, the crew only had one chance to get it right, and this was due to them as well using live shotgun rounds to get the effect. As soon as the shot was done, Savini threw the shotgun in the back of a trunk of a waiting car and was driven out of there as quickly as possible. This was done so they didn't get arrested, as firing live weapons in New York City was a crime under the Sullivan Law and carried a mandatory 5-year sentence. This shot was executed brilliantly, and the on-screen scene is one of the best kill sequences in all of cinema history. Noted film critic Gene Siskel was so disgusted by this sequence alone that he walked out of the movie and condemned the movie at every chance that he had. On his TV show with Roger Ebert, he said the film could not redeem itself after the ultra-violence that he had just witnessed. The movie was all over the news for being too graphic, and why would anyone make such a movie? This was nothing but the same noise the horror directors heard back in the early to mid-70s, when The Last House on the Left and Texas Chainsaw Massacre were released, so that no one took any notice. This noise from the media only made the movie that more intriguing to people to seek it out and watch it. The movie was never given an age rating in the United States and was released as unrated. This was done as they knew the movie would be given the dreaded X rating, so they released it under the unrated banner, which at the time, it was easier for unrated movies to be shown in cinemas than the X-rated movies, due to the X being labelled as an adult movie, even though that this is inaccurate. In the decades that followed, Maniac is now cited as one of the greatest horror slasher movies ever to be made, and it frequently appears in the top 20 slasher movies ever made by numerous outlets. Tom Savini became the Sultan of Splatter after this movie and his next released movie, The Prowler. Lustig became known as a horror director with quite a number of titles to his name, including the very underappreciated Maniac cop series. Joe Spinell was already known to many people after starring with Sylvester Stallone in the Rocky movies and opposite Al Pacino in the Godfather series, and also Cruising. During the 80s, Joe Spinell tried getting a sequel made, and in 1986, along with director Buddy Giovinazzo, created a short horror promotional movie titled Maniac 2: Mr. Robbie. This was done to create a buzz and to also raise financing for a sequel. But sadly, in 1989, Joe Spinell passed away. The sequel would never see the light of day. In 2010, Lustig announced that a remake was in development, and that Alexandre Aja, the director behind the fantastic Switchblade romance, or High Tension in the States, and the unbelievably amazing remake of The Hills of Eyes, was writing and producing the movie. The remake starred Elijah Wood as Frank Zito, and the entire movie is told from his point of view, which gives the story a fresh feeling. The movie was released in 2013 and received a lot of praise, and was also named the best horror movie of 2013 by a number of outlets. Maniac is one of my top 10 favourite horror movies ever made. The movie is completely different to other slasher movies that were released around this time, and even today. Slasher movies rely on the killer popping out of somewhere or surprising the victim for a jump scare. This isn't really any tension, but in Maniac, you know who the killer is and you follow along with him. And that's what wraps up the suspense. My favourite scene in Maniac is when Frank Zito is stalking the nurse on the subway. Everything from the camera work right down to the score makes this one of the most intense and nerve-wracking horror scenes ever filmed. The dolly shot on the other side of the bars as you follow the nurse down the subway platform is such a brilliant sequence. You feel the dread as she disappears, and then Frank appears at the other end, and the same shot is done. You want to reach out and help, but you can't, as seeing the bars makes you feel that you're trapped and can only watch. Thanks for watching. Let us know down below what you think of Maniac. Is it one of your favourites, or were the media right in saying it was nothing but a gore movie? Like and subscribe for future videos on the horror genre, so until next time, stay critical, stay scared. You can watch our series on horror here.